Testing, testing. Good morning. Well, let me try that again. Good morning. Welcome to the Maryland Climate Panel's administrative meeting for March 1st, 2023. Some of you got that joke. Now, this is still the Maryland Public Service Commission, although the Washington Post referred to us in a headline yesterday that we are a climate panel. And while that is a new charge, a new consideration, pursuant to revisions of the Public Utilities article, it does elevate and emphasize the fact that the role of the commission is changing and has been changing somewhat dramatically over the past few years, to the point where the Post views us as a climate panel. With that context, let's start today's meeting. It is March 1st. Spring is around the corner. I'd just like to thank my colleague, Commissioner Linton, for leading off and closing Black History Month yesterday with a very productive, informative, and fun lunch and learn. It was more fun for me because I won the grand prize. I don't know what it is. I can't wait to figure that out, though. Now, just emphasize the fact that we are a diverse commission. We celebrate the diversity. We have a black man, a female, a veteran, a gay man, all on this panel. And I was just proud to see so many of our staff yesterday tuned in, asking questions of such a distinguished group. We had Chair Thompson of D.C., Commissioner Gray of Delaware, Chair Brown-Dutrell of Pennsylvania, and former Senator and Commissioner Floyd McKissick of North Carolina, sharing their thoughts with the staff of this commission. So that was such a great way to end the final day of Black History Month. The staff of this commission also continues to expand. The talent pool that we find is just outstanding. I had to defend our budget on Monday, and I'm proud to say that our vacancy rate, not only our vacancy rate is below the state average, but our turnover rate is below the state average. Obviously, vacancies is an issue that sometimes keeps me up at night, but when I see the quality of the candidates that appear not only on the cert list, but who we extend offers to ultimately, I am proud that this agency can attract these individuals. Today, I am pleased to welcome Alden Manca. Alden, are you here? There he is, Alden. Alden is a brand new hire. He's a regulatory economist on our technical staff. Alden graduated from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County in 2020 with a bachelor's in economics and Spanish. He's also currently working towards a master's degree in economic policy analysis, also from UMBC, Chesapeake Bay Retrievers. He most recently worked as a statistical analyst at Cambium Assessment Incorporated. So please join me in welcoming Alden to his new role. Alden actually responded to a post that I put on my personal LinkedIn account. That's how he found out about the job, and we corresponded way back when, probably, I don't know, September, October of last year. So it does pay to advertise, because our postings on the DBM website only get us so far. So before we get started with the admin meeting today, and I know we have a number of items on our agenda, I'd like to talk about affordability and my concerns that in this state we are going in the wrong direction with respect to affordability. Obviously, we're in the midst of the 90-day legislative session right now. There are so many bills that have been introduced, that have been written by so-called advocates and activists, and maybe a few legislators. Not sure how many legislators actually write the bills, but very few, speaking from experience. And you could see fingerprints left behind. Those advocates have their perspective, they have their special interests that they cater to. They all have good intentions from their perspective. But sitting on this side of the bench, they may not see what I see every day. Over the past 72 hours, including 3 minutes ago at 9:57, I received emails. I've received over 100 emails from individual ratepayers in the state over the past 72 hours, starting on Saturday morning. I've responded to every single one except for the one that I received 3 minutes ago from Barbara. I've spoken to some over the weekend who have called me stating the fact that I cannot afford my electricity or gas bill anymore. I live in a 1,500 square foot house or apartment. My utility bill is $500-$600. I just got one 3 minutes ago. Oh, this one's $229. Mr. Chairman, please take a look at my bill. See what you could do to help me reduce it. Those are the polite ones. The nasty ones, and I don't blame them, the nasty ones say, I will not vote for you again. They don't have to worry about that. I'm a short timer. How could you have increased the rate every month? Of course, we don't increase the rates every month. On average, perhaps once a year the rate goes up. But I understand what they're saying. Their utility bill is going up despite the fact that, for instance, the BGE rate for electric went up, I believe, $2.97 effective January 1st of this year. $2.97. But if I try to argue with somebody, your bill's only gone up $2.97. No, my bill's gone up $200, $300. Then you have to explain the commodity. You have to explain the other charges. I'm talking about your distribution rate, not your supply rate. Oh, and by the way, did you know you have a supplier? What's a supplier? That was one of the conversations I had Saturday morning with a senior citizen in Columbia, Maryland, who did not know that she had a supplier. She didn't know she had non-commodity charges totaling almost $100 for sewer and water warranties. I didn't even know that was an option to have on the bill. We're loading up these bills with these other non-commodity charges. That's dangerous. For some. I mean, I would love to put my Costco and Amazon expenses on my Pepco bill. That might be convenient. Although I already have 14 lines of expenses on my Pepco bill. 14 lines. Right? Taxes, fees, Empower, supply, distribution, fixed charges, variable charges, county energy taxes. I forgot a few. Who cares about affordability in this state? I do. My colleagues do. I said last week that we are not charged, or maybe I said I am not charged with representing the interests of residential ratepayers. That is true. That is 100% true. That is the statutory charge of the Office of People's Counsel. We have something, however, much larger than residential ratepayers. We have the burden of representing and protecting the public interest. I believe it was Mr. Trout last week who said we have the awesome clause. Was that you, Mr. Trout? Or was it Mr. Collins?
It was Commissioner O'Donnell, but he was channeling me.
Okay, all right. The two of you I often confused, but Section 2-113 of the Public Utilities article is that awesome clause. We represent the public interest, which includes ratepayer interest, residential, commercial, industrial. We also are burdened with the obligation of ensuring that we have healthy utilities. The requirements now include that we have considerations with respect to the natural environment, climate, labor. So I don't begrudge the Washington Post for referring to us as a climate panel. I view that as a compliment to our awesome clause and what we do here every day. So I've responded to each of these 100 emails, 100 plus emails from individuals begging for help. And these aren't form emails. Every single one of them is different. Hence, I felt obligated to respond and will continue to respond to each of them, inviting them to to call or to meet with me to discuss these concerns, encourage them to send their bills, which they're sending me copies of their bills, and I'm sharing some of them with Consumer Affairs, and I'm resolving others directly. But they're asking, who is, if you're not PSC looking out, who is? And of course, I respond that yes, we are your utilities regulator. We are put in a position more often to, for better or worse, be a residential ratepayer advocate. But the policies that the state are considering, or some of them are actually in law, have good intentions. Electrification, decarbonization are important goals. They are goals of the state. We are a progressive state, no question there. I believe that some of our policies are ahead of the class. Let's electrify everything, everywhere, all at once. Although I believe I saw an article yesterday, perhaps it was Wall Street Journal, saying we don't have enough electricians, qualified electricians, to get us there. This country has not invested in the trade skills as it once did. So we could have these policies, but if I'm wiring a outlet, that's not going to end well. At least it won't end well for me. Are we thinking ahead? I hope so. Although sometimes it feels like we're rushing headfirst into some of these policies. Rate makers, us, serve as a check. Ratepayers, the public, can't afford a runaway train because we're lining utility bills with state policies. Lawmakers, I think it's in their DNA not to raise taxes. Fair to say. It's much easier, however, to place burdens through a utility charge, the 14 lines that I mentioned. Where's the tipping point? I think we're reaching it. Maybe we are there right now. I outlined an op-ed piece this morning with respect to the state's very successful Empower program. It was published this morning in one of the local newspapers. Empower, since its beginning, way back when, has been a very effective program of the state, reducing peak load, promoting energy efficiency. Very successful, though, for who, right? Successful for people like me who use Empower like a slot machine and make sure that I get a very nice return on my Empower line item, which typically is in the neighborhood of $10 to $15 a month for electric. Much smaller for my Washington gas bill. There's been a disparity there. A disparity that can only be fixed in statute. So I was home yesterday after I had a medical appointment, and I happened to tune into one of the Senate hearings, and there were so many bills. The new Senate E3 committee heard a number of energy bills: storage, solar, Empower. And there are two Empower bills, two competing Empower bills currently in Annapolis. One that is supported by the PSC that came through our future programming work group consensus process led by Chief Judge McClain. Full consensus of the parties supported that one. And then there was another bill sponsored largely by these advocates No price tag. No price tag on either bill. The work group wasn't able to determine what the ultimate cost is. But these costs, who will bear them? Not the utilities, not this commission, but ultimately ratepayers in the end. The bill that the commission is very supportive of defers to the experience and expertise of these commissioners and the staff in order to assure that the cost of the program is not unreasonable. However, this other bill, no checks. There's a goal. There's going to be a very expensive goal. We had Office of People's Counsel testify yesterday in support of that other bill with no price tag. And we had a witness testify. One of the advocates said, don't support the PSC's bill, support this other bill, because PSC commissioners, quote, are influenced by rate pressure. Damn straight we're influenced by rate pressure. Commissioners could be worried about, quote, rate expenditures. Yes, that too. We worry about that too. And it serves as a check. Hence, the PSC endorsed bill is one that allows the PSC discretion and flexibility. I didn't think flexibility was so bad, as opposed to goals in statute with no price tag. Who's going to be paying for that? The ratepayers, the low-income ratepayers, the moderate-income ratepayers, the well-to-do. These are expensive policies, one right after another. There's another bill on community solar, and I am supportive of community solar. But this one also has a very expensive price tag in it. There's a number of components, but one of them is to allow low and moderate income folks, well, all folks, everybody who signs up for community solar, to put their community solar subscription fees on the utility bill. Subscription fees. I was telling you earlier about viewing some of these. I'd love to put my Reader's Digest subscription fees on my utility bill. Those non-commodity expenses on a bill can be considered by the utility for service termination. That goes against the balance. A low-income rate, that's a good idea. I think that's something we need to explore. But having door-to-door salesmen knock on LMI doors owned by LMI customers, selling them a product with subscription fees that will end up on their bill, are we doing them any favors if we end up disconnecting their service for cause? We're exiting COVID, thank goodness. The utilities will be returning to a normal state of operations in the very near term. But is this what we want to do? I would hope not. I won't be here in 4 months from now, but you know what will be here? An $800 million bill that's coming due for ratepayers. Ratepayers don't even know it's coming. I've been attempting to notify folks in Annapolis. $800 million bill is coming due for services rendered under the Empower program. Fine, just put it on the utility bill. Amortize it over a couple of years. Well, that Empower bill could increase significantly, could double, to pay off debts owed, debts that are currently accruing effectively interest at an authorized return. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. And to hear an advocate yesterday at one of these bill hearings state that these burdened communities, well, they are burdened, the witness said. I agree. Energy expenses are increasing. But the cost of the utilities updating its IT systems, $10, $20 million to accommodate community solar to be put on the bill for the benefit of, I imagine, very few customers. I asked some community solar folks, is this something we really need? Can the individual not pay two bills? You pay your cable bill and your grocery bill separately. You pay your utility bill separately from your gasoline bill when you fill up your car. Is it that much of a burden to pay your utility bill and your community solar subscription fee? Is there a nexus there that we need to tie them together and incur millions of dollars in IT charges that will be paid for by these low-income customers and all customers? Doesn't seem to make sense. But this advocate stated, much to my surprise and shock, these communities are so burdened already, a little more burden isn't going to hurt them. You can watch the tape. That might be the straw that breaks the camel's back, a community solar subscription fee. Who would have ever thought? I bet you go to the far reaches of West Baltimore, mother trying to support her family. Somebody knocks on the door. Could be a retail supplier, it could be a community solar subscriber. All right, here, sign this documentation. You'll get a lower rate if you do subscribe into the program. I know some of us have attempted to subscribe, but we're still waiting. Read the fine print. You may be disconnected if you don't pay your subscription fees that will be on your BGE bill in the future. And by the way, you and everybody else will have to pay your share of the IT programming costs. Is that fair? Utilities are indifferent. They're not going to pay a dime. 10 million, 20 million. I'm a little tired of hearing from the utilities when every time we have a change to the legacy IT systems, $1 million here, $1 million there, 10 million, 20 million. Lord knows we heard a lot about that at supplier consolidated billing. That's only taken 20 plus years and counting. So in my final months of office here, I'm going to continue to unfortunately play this dual role, serving as the residential ratepayer advocate, because I am concerned with affordability in this state. Like I said, decarbonization is great. Electrification is great. Battery storage, we'll need it. We have 4 projects in operation, 4 to go. God's honest truth, though, is we don't have a lot of renewable power in this state just yet. We spent a lot of money on RECs. What's a REC? I love the chairman of the Economic Matters Committee. He speaks plainly. He calls his members out when he knows that they don't know what all these advocates are talking about. I mean, have you ever gotten home and found a REC on your kitchen table? Right? I haven't. What is a REC? I imagine most people don't know what a REC is. We could decarbonize by midnight tonight. It will be extremely expensive. Who's going to pay? You? Me? Governor? I understand that the policy of the state is bold and decisive leadership on climate and environmental issues. I think that's good. I like to know what that means. I'd like to know who's going to pay for all of this. But soon enough, I'll just be an average Joe reading the Sun and the Washington Post and hope that the state does not overburden those least able to pay their utility bill, such as the 102, 9 minutes ago. Well, let me read this one that just came in. Let's see. Came in at 10:17 this morning. Mr. Stanek, I too am upset about the utility price hikes. I am a Howard County resident that can hardly afford to live here anymore. We have saved money and a good retirement account until the price of everything went up and our retirement funds went down. I had to retire from the Postal Service because my husband has an illness. I'm not going to describe what that illness is. I am his caretaker now. Please, what can be done about this? I want to stay in my home and not disrupt my husband. It is becoming financially hard on us to stay. This individual lives on Cherry Tree Drive in Fulton, Maryland. This email arrived at 10:17 a.m. after this administrative meeting has begun. This commission is going to experience so many rate cases this year. Fair to say, we have 2 filed. Potomac Edison has publicly announced that they'll be filing a rate case. I suspect others, if I could set my watch, I'll know when they'll be coming in. But I leave it to my colleagues on this bench to guard against these excessive policies, because customers need to be able to afford their bill. And this state, with only 1 out of 5 eligible households on energy assistance, is nothing to be proud of. The fact that our state's Office of Home Energy Programs, who has had several good leaders, well, they've had 3 leaders over the past year or so, but good people. But they have like 6 or 7 people in the office. We need our utility rates to be affordable. I'll turn to my colleagues if they have any opening statements. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for those rather sobering remarks, and I tend to agree with you, as my colleagues know. It's one of the benchmarks that I set for myself when we're considering decisions on these cases, and you'll hear me talk about the fixed income elderly person or the single mom raising kids, working 2 jobs to try to make it happen. And we get up in these tall buildings and nice hearing rooms where we're comfortable, and we sometimes forget about that, as do policymakers across the board. And having spent 21 and a half years in Annapolis in the legislature, sometimes our zeal, and this is not a bad thing because it causes change, it's actually a good thing, but our zeal for change helps us to forget the challenges to implementation and the people whose lives we may affect. And so it's a constant reminder, and I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. As my colleagues know, I dissented on a decision recently to move that unamortized balances in the Empower program over to an expensing model to get it off the books. And these are transgressions that started many, many years ago, long before anybody sitting on this current commission was here, but they've accumulated, and they're due and owing. And they're due and owing by the citizens, the ratepayers of Maryland. But I thought the economic conditions at the time, and I didn't disagree with the merits. I did not disagree with the merits, but the timing was not good, because it was going to put a burden on people who were already struggling. Inflation, energy costs, food costs, commodity costs, and energy. You go right down the line. So many things challenging. And so I dissented as a kind of a reminder a conscience of the commission. We can't forget those things, and policymakers across the board can't forget those things. Zeal is a good thing and it causes change, but if we don't be honest, if we're not honest about the potential negative ramifications, the downside of things, we kick in the law of unintended consequences. What am I talking about? I'm talking about arrearage management plans. We struggled with arrearage management. We've been struggling in this state with arrearage management for decades. But the things you're talking about are about ready to make that worse, I fear. And when it makes it worse, we're going to have a bigger public policy problem. Because ultimately, the utilities are not going to pay those arrearages that go unpaid, the bills that go unpaid. The utilities aren't going to pay them. State's not going to pay them. Taxpayers not going to pay them. Who's going to pay them? The other ratepayers, the other residential ratepayers mostly. And I speak to the advocates for the residential ratepayers. When we crank up them bills and we cause arrearages to go up, those costs get socialized to the other ratepayers. That's who pays them. And yet, in their zeal, bang the table, we got to pass this. Well, there's a balancing of interests. When I was in elected office, sometimes you got to try to explain things. Are you right or are you left? And I was generally considered pretty far right, but I have to tell you, I always had a healthy appreciation for the fact that systems that are in balance, and I come from a technological, nuclear, maybe engineering influenced background, systems that are in balance work the best. And if you need to know what I'm talking about, fill your washing machine at home when it's out of balance. See how it works. It doesn't work well. And eventually it will break because it's shaking to work to do its job. It's working way too hard. But you put that system in balance and it works very easily. So we got a lot of challenges ahead of us, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your reminder because this is a time of transition at the commission, and we know that, and that's not a bad thing. Over time, it has served this state well, and as much as we love what we do, we know these are transitory positions, and we all will move on eventually. But this commission prides itself on taking its job very, very seriously. Notwithstanding the fact that some of our colleagues in state government like to tell us that we don't know what the heck we're doing and that we're captured somehow. I found out what regulatory capture is very early in coming to this commission. And it's a foible of the early regulatory scheme where the regulated would capture the discretions of the regulator. Don't see any evidence of that here. In fact, this agency works very hard to balance the public's interests. And I'm proud of that. And when arrearage managements during the COVID pandemic needed to be fixed or at least worked on and there was some money, do you think they went to the state agency that's charged with doing that has the experience of doing that? No, you know where they came? They came to the economic regulators of the public utilities to work that system. You know why? Because they knew we were serious and they knew we would get it done. And there have been other things. And now we see another charge coming our way, which is the environmental charge. And why do we not completely rely on the Maryland Department of the Environment or other large, very large bureaucracies and entities in this 80,000 person state government? And we put a disproportionate burden on the Public Service Commission, in my opinion, because we're going to get it done. We're going to find a way. Our professionals, our staff, and our commissioners all take our jobs very seriously. Again, notwithstanding the criticisms of some who like to throw stones. But we'll get it done. We're going to find a way. But keep in mind that things that are in balance serve us all much better than when things get out of balance. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I have to say.
Commissioner Linton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to everyone. We will get to the administrative meeting shortly. I think the important point that you mentioned earlier, Mr. Chairman, hopefully wasn't lost in a lot of what we've already been talking about here this morning, and is that a number of customers are already reaching out for assistance. And keeping in mind that we're still during the period of what we've referred to historically as the winter restriction period. I've seen letters like the ones that you've received, and they are very difficult to respond to. I've responded to customers over the years in person and over the phone, and those are oftentimes very difficult conversations. But over the last 3 years, we've had a number of COVID protections in place, not just on a state level, not even from this commission, but even on a federal level. There's been an awful lot of COVID-related money available to help customers pay for their bills. There's been assistance programs available for other programs that are related to just the general living in the household, such as the SNAP program. Those of you with student loans know you haven't had to pay those. Customers haven't had to worry about collection actions from a number of different other industries other than the energy industry. All of that's coming to an end. We know we've heard about it on the federal side. People who received extra benefits and SNAP assistance, that ends today for millions of customers across the country. Our COVID-related protections are ending next month in April. That means that a number of our, unfortunately, but this is just the way the timing worked out, we have quite a few people here at the commission and in the industry, and even among our elected officials, who've never experienced that time when consumers are regularly concerned about paying their bills and are very vocal about how to do so. And that even impacts here at this commission. And so that time is very rapidly approaching. We're now on March 1st. April 1st is the end of the winter restriction period. And our utility companies will do the work that they are directed to do by our Code of Maryland regulations, by their utility tariffs, and that's to collect on outstanding debts. All of the bills that we've been talking about all this time that's been suspended. So there's nothing that they're doing that's inappropriate. I guess if there is, we'll find out. But there are real implications to that. And over the years, I've seen where many other concepts and ideas and goals have been established, and then the reality of how consumers are going to respond to it has to come into play. And when that happens, and I've seen this at least 3 times over the years, there's really only 2 things that, for lack of a better word, derails those goals. Large mass outages, which come from major storms, or other types of events that cause everybody to refocus on what the energy industry has historically and traditionally always been, which is the effort to produce a safe and reliable product and commodity at prudently incurred costs. Everybody knows the mantra. But the other reason is when consumers are incapable of paying the bills. And as a result, it really brings us back into focus. So I say that because we know already that the assistance network that we historically have relied on for many years is not there right now. We heard that a couple of months ago from some of the advocacy organizations that are here in Maryland. We know that some of the organizations don't have the staff that used to be there years ago. The fundraisers that used to occur in order to raise money to assist customers when they called for help, those fundraisers haven't happened. We don't have those people that used to be there in place. And that goes from our Office of Home Energy Programs to the Fuel Fund to all of the other assistance agencies that we used to regularly rely on. The fact that the people aren't there and the funding that we used to rely on isn't there isn't going to change the fact that customers have large bills, COVID-related, various initiatives that this commission, that the General Assembly, that other entities have established. And those customers are already reaching out to us, and we're 30 days away now. The chairman's receiving 100 emails now. You can imagine what it'll be like towards the end of this month. And you can imagine what it will be like in the middle of next month. So all I'm suggesting to you, to everybody, is that there is a real challenge pending, and it is one that this industry has faced on a regular basis. So this might seem like a doom and gloom kind of message to you, and I don't mean it to be that way. Instead, it is more of an alarm. So I guess if it's Monday morning and you hear the alarm, you're not happy about it, but it is still a good thing to get out of bed and be able to do whatever it is you want to do, as opposed to not having that option. So this is what I would consider an alarm for you. As you know, I probably won't be here to help you out with it, so you'll have to carry that from here going forward. And there's going to be a real experience for many of you to become more familiar and aware of what's going on. And like I said, it's going to take all of us and all of you to be ready to respond to consumers that need that assistance, because they are already reaching out, and I will tell you they'll get more vocal if you're not responsive to them. And the consumers ultimately are the ones, the people on the other side of the meter. Everything that we talk about is on one side, everything from transmission and power and all these other initiatives. But if the people on the other side of the meter aren't happy, you'll know about it very quickly. So I would say just good luck, but I don't know if that's appropriate. But
Thank you, Commissioner Linton. Commissioner Bubar.
Thank you for the opportunity to just offer some thoughts, and thank you, Chairman, for sharing everything that you did, and including your personal thoughts. So I'm just going to share some of my own. When I was offered the opportunity to become a commissioner, I just thought this is such an awesome job. But as each day goes by and I understand the awesome responsibility that we have, my heart gets heavy every day. These decisions that we make are so impactful. And when you look at what is on our plate and is going to have to be made in the future, decisions have to be made in the future. I just hope that whoever replaces those of us who won't be in the future understand the gravity of those decisions. And I want to also just reiterate the confidence in the PSC, not only commissioners, but staff. The staff who are here and will remain here have complete confidence that they understand the gravity of this and will offer the best analysis, as they always do, to help ensure that good decisions get made. But as we go forward on this, I just want to kind of reiterate the theme of the chairman. This can't just be the Public Service Commission who cares and worries about this. It has to be across state government as we look at these policies and the impact to all of us, ratepayers, customers. And so I just hope that as we go forward, the balance does come, and it's just not on the Public Service Commission worrying about this.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the opportunity just to join you and all my colleagues in really the important issue that you've raised this morning about affordability and the impacts of the decisions we are making here have on the citizens of Maryland. So I think everyone's heard that this is an extremely important issue for all of us, and I know it is also to the commission staff. I was heartened by, I guess, some comments yesterday by Senate President Ferguson when he was talking about the role of what we do at the commission, and he said our role is to balance the ambitious climate goals with the need to protect consumers from high cost. So it's good. I think they have that message in Annapolis. I also want to acknowledge and thank the Office of People's Counsel who've been up in Annapolis, reminding them of the regressivity of trying to solve all of the state's problems. It's all a state problem, but a lot of the goals we have on the electric bill. Just again reminding them it's a very regressive approach, and our progressive policies need to be paid for with progressive policies, and progressive means of making them affordable. I'm also hopeful that we as a commission can think about how we might be able to lessen some of the burdens, perhaps through innovative ideas on setting low-income tariffs, how we can best utilize some of our energy assistance money to make sure that they're targeted for low income, and then also programs like Empower, how we can do better at ensuring that these are serving all of our citizens. As you pointed out, sometimes those of us here, we understand the programs and we take advantage of them, but we need to make sure that just everybody is benefited from these programs. So again, I really thank you for your powerful statement this morning, and just let you know that I stand with you in trying to find ways to address these issues here at the commission, and also just to get the word out about, again, supporting our progressive policies as a state with progressive payment methods. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Mr. Chairman, just a different note down a different path, because I haven't done this for a while, and I think it'll be on a different chord, maybe positive. On this date in history, in 1872, actually earlier in the year, Congress moved to set aside some 2 million acres of public land straddling the future states of Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho as America's first national park. President Ulysses S. Grant signed the bill into law on this date in 1872. The Yellowstone Act of 1872 designated the region as a public pleasuring ground, which would be preserved from injury or spoliation of all timber, mineral deposits, natural curiosities, or wonders within, end quote. And I think that's important because although it doesn't directly get to what we're talking about here, one, we have many decades of creating these national treasures, these national parks, and it was done incrementally over time. And so we received the great benefits, the great treasures, the preservation of our natural resources done incrementally and not driving over a cliff. I think that was positive. Thank you.
That was, and I think it tied our discussion this morning together very, very nicely. We do have meeting minutes to approve from our last meeting on February 22nd, 2023. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The meeting minutes are approved. Good morning, Mr. Secretary.
Good morning. There are 9 items on today's consent agenda. Item number 1 is an application from Boomerang Wireless LLC, DBA InTouch Wireless, to amend its eligible telecommunications carrier service area. Item number 2 is a petition from Dish Wireless LLC for designation as an eligible telecommunication carrier. Item number 3 is a notification from EDF Energy Services LLC and BP Energy Retail Company LLC of ownership change. Item number 4 is a notice of cancellation of bond from Travelers Casualty and Surety for Quick Energy Solutions LLC. Items 5, 7, 8, and 9 are updated SOS rates for Type 2 customers, and item number 6 consists of updated SOS rates for residential customers from Potomac Edison Company.
Thank you. Do my colleagues have any questions on these items? I do have a question on item number 1. If staff, I believe it's Mr. Thomas. Do we have Boomerang Wireless here with us? I'll ask Mr. Thomas the same question I did last time. Mr. Thomas, do we know if Boomerang Wireless, doing business as InTouch Wireless, is with us, or why they're not here?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Evan Thomas on behalf of staff. They're not here today. I'm not sure why they're not here today.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. I read your buck sheet. Is Office of People's Counsel here today? Thank you. If you could please approach.
Juliana Bell, Deputy Counsel, Office of People's Counsel.
Thank you, Ms. Bell. You've reviewed Mr. Thomas's buck sheet.
I have not.
Is there somebody from Office of People's Counsel who's prepared on this item?
I do not believe so, Your Honor.
Okay. Ms. Bell, you're not familiar with the facts of this case?
I am not.
Okay. I'll tell you that we have an overwhelming majority of Lifeline customers in this case that were unable to be ported off of the 3G system before the clock struck midnight on New Year's Day. That's concerning. The majority of these Lifeline customers, number one, couldn't be contacted. Number two, they couldn't be ported. I will express some concern, Ms. Bell. Last week we had a $15 million debt shelf that was controversial. I voted yes. Commissioner O'Donnell, I believe, voted no. Was that right? Yeah. On the Columbia Gas item, Office of People's Counsel did not have any, well, wasn't even available to weigh in on that. So
Your Honor, we did review that item for the $15 million.
$50 million debt shelf.
Yes, Your Honor. We had a consultant review it. I believe Nicole Zeigner of our office also looked at it. We have previously entered testimony on debt requests.
In response to that item last week?
Not in response to that item.
Okay, Ms. Bell, I'd rather not get back to last week's AM, but I would just ask that Office of People's Counsel have an attorney able to represent the interests of residential ratepayers. Here we have a large number of Lifeline customers that never received notification. I know staff's position, they articulated in the buck sheet. Okay, my colleagues, any questions? Seeing none, Mr. Evans, on Mr. Evan Thomas, on balance, I would move that we allow a 30-day period for any party that believes the application should be rejected to file comments, and find that the amendment of the service area for the company is in the public interest, and grant the company such designation pursuant to Title 47 of the United States Code, Section 214, E as in echo, for the service territory specified in its application 10 days later, unless adverse comments are received by the Commission prior to that date. I'll take a vote on that one, and then we'll do the rest. The vote begins with Commissioner Bubar.
Aye.
Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
And Commissioner Richard.
Aye.
I vote aye. The motion is approved. With respect to the balance of the consent agenda, with respect to item number 2, I move that we allow a 30-day period for any party that believes that the application should be rejected to file comments, and find that Dish Wireless's designation as an eligible telecommunications carrier is in the public interest, and grant the company such designation pursuant to Title 47 of the United States Code, Section 214, E as in echo, for the service territory specified in its application 10 days later, unless adverse comments are received by the Commission prior to that date. With respect to item number 3, I move that we note the filing. With respect to item number 4, I move that we cancel the company's electricity supplier license. And finally, with respect to items number 6, 7, 8, and 9, I move that we accept the tariff revisions for filing with an effective date of March the 1st, 2023. The vote begins with Commissioner Bubar.
Aye.
Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
And Commissioner Richard.
Aye.
I vote aye. The motions are approved. Mr. Secretary, the
Mr. Chairman.
administrative... Oh, Mr. Trout, yes?
For item 6, I think you wanted the effective date to be June 1st.
Did I?
I think you did.
Okay. Let me just confirm that, so we could correct
I didn't.
the motion on the record. Item number 6. Do we have the staff available for Bucksheet 6? Mr. Delgado, you might save me some time from pulling up your file. Do you concur with Mr. Trout?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Eric Delgado on behalf of staff. I do concur. Rates become effective June 1st, 2023.
Thank you. I'd just like to orally modify the motion for item number 6 is accept the tariff revisions for filing with an effective date of June the 1st, 2023. With that package, I'll retake the vote again with...
Let's no.
No, Mr. Delgado, the buck sheet is in error.
I got a question. Why? Why? It says March 23rd, like the rest of them, or March 1st, like the rest of them.
So the tariff revisions will be approved March 1st, but the rates for residential customers will be effective on June 1st.
Is that for all of them?
No, just for the residential customers.
Just for item 6?
Just for item 6, it looks like, yes. Yeah.
The buck sheet does say effective March 1st, 2023.
Let's say residential customers will be effective on June.
Good morning, Mr. McAuliffe.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Drew McAuliffe on behalf of staff. Yeah, so the rest of the SOS buck sheets were type 2, so they're effective March 1st. Those rates go into effect March 1st. The residential, typically we put March 1st because that's when the tariff is approved, but the rates are not technically effective until June 1st. If that clarifies it.
Oh, better prospective than retroactive.
Yes, it does say that on page 2, so yes.
Any additional questions from the bench? Hearing none, just to clarify, I would amend the item number 6 motion to state that we would accept the tariff revisions for filing with an effective date of June 1st, 2023. If I could ask the commissioners to vote on the package again, beginning with Commissioner Bubar,
Aye.
Commissioner Linton,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell,
Aye.
and Commissioner Richard.
Aye.
I vote aye. The package of 2 through items 9 are approved.
Mr. Chairman, item number 10 is an elective balancing service rider from Columbia Gas of Maryland, Inc.
Good morning, Dr. Coates.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Pam Coates on behalf of staff. On January 25th, 2023, Columbia Gas of Maryland, Columbia, filed their annual update to the Elective Balancing Services Rider, the EBS rider. The proposed rate is to become effective with the April 2023 billing cycle. The EBS rider affects only Columbia's commercial and industrial customers who obtain their gas from a retail supplier. The EBS rider enables Columbia to recover the cost of providing banking and balancing services to these customers. Columbia's proposed EBS rider rate represents a 4.6% decrease compared with the current rate. The lower rate is driven by a decrease in the cost of pipeline storage. Staff has reviewed the company's calculations and supporting documents and the company's process for communicating with affected customers and has found them to be in accordance with the requirements of the EBS rider. Staff recommends that the proposed tariff revision be accepted for filing effective with Columbia's April 2023 billing cycle. Thank you, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Dr. Coates. Mr. Gregor. Good morning, Mr. Gallagher.
Good morning, Theodore Gallagher on behalf of Columbia Gas of Maryland.
Any comments? Do you support staff?
I fully agree with support staff's analysis.
Thank you. Do commissioners have questions for staff? Commissioner Bubar.
Thank you. I'll address this to Dr. Coates, but maybe the company can answer. About how many customers are we talking about that are in this EBS that received this rider?
Do you have a good answer?
I don't have that off the top of my head, but I know that people are watching this and they may text me with that answer.
I have the answer. Let's see. The average monthly customer count for 2022 was 257.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And in the buck sheet, Dr. Coates, you talked about the reasons for the difference in the lower cost compared to, kind of the settlement. And one of those reasons was decreased usage. And so maybe this is for the company, I don't know, but I was just wondering, do you have any insights on why there's decreased usage projected? And I think you did interviews with some of the customers, but I was just trying to understand what you would attribute that to.
Yes, Commissioner, that it's based upon the interviews that we do with the customers about their prospective usage and the feedback that we get based on that.
And is it the same amount of customers going forward, but you expect that they would use less of the commodity?
To my understanding, they're projecting less usage.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no additional questions, I would move that we accept the tariff revisions for filing effective with the company's April 2023 billing cycle. The vote begins with Commissioner Bubar.
Aye.
Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Aye.
And Commissioner Richard?
Aye.
I vote aye. The motion is approved.
Item number 11 is a request from Washington Gas Light Company for a commercial program budget reallocation under the Empower program.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Jang.
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners. Michael Jang on behalf of staff. Item number 11 is a request from Washington Gas Light Company to reallocate Empower incentive budget from its commercial prescriptive program to the commercial custom program. Specifically, the company is requesting to reallocate 46%, or $290,000 of the commercial prescriptive incentive budget to the commercial custom program. In order to keep overall commercial portfolio therm savings consistent, the company also plans to shift 46% of the forecasted therm savings, or 101,800 therms, from the commercial prescriptive program to the commercial custom program. The company explains that the commercial custom program is on track to exhaust all its current incentive budget in 2023, while the commercial prescriptive program has a surplus of incentive budget to support its pipeline of projects in 2023. The company's filing explains that delays in project completions in 2022, which were extended to 2023, is why the custom program current incentive budget is on track to be exhausted in 2023. Staff recommends the Commission approve the reallocation request and is available for any question.
Thank you, Mr. Jang. Mr. Dean, Mr. Nichols.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioner. Spencer Nichols on behalf of Washington Gas. With you is my colleague, Josh McCallan, Senior Manager, Energy Efficiency. We fully concur with staff's recommendations.
Thank you. Questions from the Commissioners? Seeing none, I would move that we approve the reallocation request. The vote begins with Commissioner Bubar.
Aye.
Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
And Commissioner Richard.
Aye.
I vote aye. The motion is approved.
Item number 12 is a request from the Potomac Edison Company to revise the up to incentive amounts for HVAC and heat pump systems under the Empower program.
Good morning, Mr. Herbert.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Charles Herbert on behalf of staff. Item number 12 is a request from the Potomac Edison Company to revise their up to incentive amounts for its heating, ventilation, and air conditioning and heat pump water heater systems. PE's request is derived from SMECO's October 17th, 2022 filing, which resulted from discussions and findings from within the midstream working group. It was determined that increasing incentives around HVAC and HPWH equipment would increase their purchase. The midstream working group's findings resulted from interviews with trade allies, state and utility program data, and feedback from stakeholders. PE's request is identical to SMECO's request with respect to the amounts by which incentives are raised and the new incentive amounts that result. However, PE's request is distinct from SMECO's in that no additional budgets or budget transfers are being requested. Rather, PE will use carryover budgets from 2021 and 2022 to handle the incentive increases. Accordingly, staff recommends that the Commission approve the incentive change request.
Thank you, Mr. Herbert. Just to be clear, the entire amount is funded by carryover?
That is correct.
Thank you. We'll turn to Office of People's Counsel.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. OPC's comments on PE's request to revise the up-to incentives for HVAC and heat pump water heaters is consistent with what we filed a few months ago in regards to SMECO's similar request. We generally support and applaud PE's proposal to increase incentives for heat pumps, but we do have three concerns that I'd just like to go over. First, OPC opposes increased incentives for central air conditioners through Empower. The reason for this is that central air conditioners directly compete with heat pumps for their cooling capabilities, but provide none of the low-emission and efficient heating abilities that are provided by electric heat pumps. We feel that the installation, in fact, I think it's safe to say the installation of a central air conditioner serves as a disincentive for a customer to install a heat pump. After a customer has made an investment in a new central air conditioner, that customer is unlikely to want to then buy a heat pump shortly thereafter, because they essentially would be making a piece of newly purchased equipment obsolete. So we do believe that Empower should phase out incentives for central air conditioners by the start of the January 2024 cycle. At this time, we're not recommending that PE remove incentives for central air conditioners. We understand they're already in their plans right now, but we do disagree with giving an increased incentive. It just seems counterproductive when we're trying to, in the state, and the climate goals should be promoting heat pumps. Also, it was unclear to us from PE's request whether their proposal is consistent with the new Department of Energy standards for updated HVAC testing and metrics. We would suggest that the Commission inquire, or maybe more information can be obtained from PE as to whether this is consistent with the new standards. The new standards were updated on January 1st, 2023, and it seems that any equipment incentivized at this time should be consistent with those new standards.
Ms. Eichner, obviously PE filed this back in October. Have you reached out to Mr. Trout to ask that question?
I believe this is actually, could correct me if I'm wrong, this is their February 8th filing. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. But you've had discussions with the utility?
And we haven't, and I can explain. We were fairly certain that they were not updated, so we were going with that, but then we thought we can't assume that, and we had some additional internal discussions, so at the last minute we changed it and said it's best to just inquire. So I'm sorry, but we have not had the opportunity to discuss that with PE.
I'm sure Mr. Trout will respond.
Yes, thank you. And then our third request is also related to federal standards. Because the IRA provides so many wonderful incentives for heat pumps, it would make sense for PE's incentives to be aligned, and all of the power utilities for that matter, for incentives to be aligned with the Federal Inflation Reduction Act standards. This would help consumers because they wouldn't have to worry about being unable to stack incentives. We want to allow for any stacking of federal rebates or federal incentives with Empower incentives. So this might be something that would be difficult for PE to change now, but certainly as soon as possible, Empower Maryland utilities should update their standards to comply with federal standards. So in general, we do support PE's proposal, but without increased incentives for central air conditioners and with modifications if needed to ensure consistency with federal standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Eichner. Good morning, Mr. Trout.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Jeffrey Trout, on behalf of Potomac Edison. Before I respond, I'd like to step very briefly into my role as the unofficial Commission historian. And before we go too much further down the road of discussing the Awesome Powers Clause in future proceedings, I just want to disclaim credit for having coined that phrase to refer to the Commission's the ancillary powers in the statute to do whatever is necessary, basically, to implement their expressly delegated powers. That's the Awesome Powers Clause. I did not create that characterization. I learned it from Frank Heinz. And I had the pleasure, when I first came to Maryland more than 20 years ago, to work for Mr. Heinz after he had left the commission and while he was president of BGE. And I learned many things from him, and that was one of them. So anyway, so no pride of authorship. All right, sorry about that digression. Back to business. Potomac Edison supports staff's analysis and recommendation with respect to OPC's three caveats. Respectfully, we disagree with their request that you disallow the increase of incentives with respect to one type of equipment. That type of equipment is part of our existing program. We have goals that we need to try to reach with respect to that equipment for the remainder of this program year. The change we're trying to make is expressly targeted to trying to meet those goals. The issue of what technologies the next cycle of Empower should and should not be promoting is an issue that we will be addressing this fall, and I do not believe that we should disadvantage a part of the current program at this juncture, and for the same reasons that the Commission approved that same change with respect to SMECO's request several months ago, we believe that the Commission should today approve that. With respect to OPC's other 2 points, both of which have to do with conforming to changes in federal standards or new opportunities or guidance that's available as a result of recent changes in federal law. Those are good points. We heard them for the first time from OPC when they filed their buck sheet on Monday. And we would be happy to discuss those points with OPC further. We respectfully suggest, however, that this is not a one utility discussion. The appropriate place to discuss what changes need to be made now, and certainly what changes need to be made with respect to the new programs that we're all going to be talking about starting in September, would be in the various work groups, one or more of the work groups that the Commission has currently ongoing that address these very issues. So it should be, those discussions should involve all the utilities. They should be open to other stakeholders that want to participate. It should be an open process, and it is not something, I believe, that should be addressed on the fly in an admin.
Thank you, Mr. Trout. I agree with that last statement. Nothing should be on the fly here. The commissioners need to be well informed. The parties need to do their due diligence. Ms. Zeichner, I understand you didn't have a lot of time here, but at the same time, it doesn't take very long to pick up the phone to resolve these two federal-related issues with the utility. In recent meetings, I've seen a sort of a disturbing trend with Office of People's Counsel not being quite prepared to defend the positions of the residential ratepayers. I do have a question for you, Ms. Zeichner, regarding your primary argument, argument number 1. It's my understanding that the air conditioners at play here are new and efficient air conditioning, central air conditioning units. Is that correct?
Well, in part, Mr. Chairman, I don't know because they did not, and that goes back to the federal standards. I don't know. And I'm not sure that, and I could be wrong, I'm not sure that Mr. Trout answered that question, whether they comply with the federal standards.
Mr. Trout, these are central air conditioning units. They have minimum SEER ratings. These aren't window units. I would expect that these are, in order to get the benefit, these are efficient units. Is that right?
That is correct.
So, Ms. Zeichner, why should we deny a customer who wants to install an energy-efficient appliance in their house and deny them of receiving the benefit of $600 or $1,000? We do know that a fair number of people in the PE service territory are low and moderate income. Could they not use the $600 or $1,000 if they make the conscious decision to install and replace an arguably inefficient with a newer technology?
And that's, in part, that's why we're not suggesting that PE should remove incentives for central air conditioners right now. We think that should be a program-wide change that happens for the next cycle. But increasing the incentives to us just really sends the wrong message. And I'm not sure that those, I myself recently had to replace a central air conditioner before I worked here, before I had such knowledge of these issues. And no one really talked to me. My contractor didn't talk to me about heat pumps or options or things like that. So I'm not sure customers are getting the full information they need. And when we create an incentive to buy a piece of technology that's going to compete with the technology that the state has agreed that we need to move towards. We've got the analysis from E3 for the Maryland Commission on Climate Change, and we have the recommendations from the Maryland Commission on Climate Change saying that we need to replace fossil fuel heating in residential homes with heat pumps. So that's part of our concern. We know that we need more education on these issues. We know that Empower needs to do better with marketing and recruiting contractors. So that's part of our concern.
I agree with you 100%, Ms. Zeichner, that education and options, the customer needs to be well informed. If they don't know they have the option to get a very efficient heat pump over some $10,000 central air conditioned system, the customers need to be empowered, for lack of a better word, to make that decision. I agree with you 100%. You call the air conditioning guy, he may sell a Trane unit or a Frigidaire unit or whatnot. It might not be in his interest to sell you a heat pump because he doesn't sell heat pumps or he doesn't sell that brand. So I agree with you that education has to be paramount. But here, your office is opposing an increase. You're not saying we should get rid of the central air conditioning benefit entirely. That's right.
We do support that for the next cycle. So in, I guess 7 months, next year, we support that next year. So increasing the incentive now could push people to make this decision now, put in a central air conditioner, and then they're locked into that equipment when maybe in a few years someone will come to approach them or provide them with Empower marketing material and say, now would be a good time to switch to a heat pump. But they've already invested in that air conditioner, and this incentive pushes them further to do that. It just seems counterproductive to the state's goals, and to this increased incentive could possibly push more customers to do this right before the messaging may change for them to switch to heat pumps.
But what about that customer in the panhandle of the state? Perhaps they just have a summer cabin that they go to. They want to be cool in the heat of the summer. They're not there in the winter. They don't need a heat pump. What about that person? Should they be denied the incentive?
I would say the person is still allowed to purchase that equipment. This is not a ban on equipment. That person can still purchase that. And if it's a summer cabin, if we're talking, I don't want to make speculations about income, but if we're talking about low-income people, it would appear that if that person owns 2 homes, they likely can afford this without the incentive. And that's just a speculation, of course. I can't make that generalization, but it's just an example of customers will still be able to do this. But we were sending the wrong message when we're increasing incentives for them to do this.
Thank you, Ms. Eichner. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Ms. Eichner, let me continue down that path a little bit further. If we accept your recommendation that PE not offer the incentive beyond January 1st, 2024, aren't we prejudging this item for the next cycle? I mean, this is a single utility, and we have to come up with decisions for the entire cycle for all the utilities in the Empower program. Aren't we kind of prejudging this matter?
And Commissioner O'Donnell, I agree. We're not asking that the incentives for central air conditioners be eliminated for PE today. We just wanted to state our position as to the future and why we don't believe the incentive should increase.
Well, I understand, but even to the extent that we would agree with that, we're kind of prejudging what the decision we're going to make one way or the other in the future programming cycle.
I might say that we could always change it later, but it's hard to back down from an incentive.
We haven't heard from the other stakeholders, the other utilities or anyone else. This is a single utility on a single item on an AM. And the Office of People's Counsel seems to be kind of morphing the future program cycle with this item together to try to get us to make a pre-decision, because I'm sure we'll hear in the fall, well, back in March you did this because you must have said there was merit to our argument.
And I can say that this position is consistent with what we said in regards to SMECO's request. This is not the first time we've made this request. We're not singling out Potomac Edison. And I feel like if you increase the incentive, contractors learn about that. There's an expectation created. Backing down from that might be more difficult later, whereas I'm sure contractors would be happy to learn of an increased incentive later.
Mrs. Agner, do you know how many times in my public policy life I've been told that consistency is the hobgoblin of small minds in a pejorative sense? Thank you.
Commissioner Bubar.
I have a question. I don't know who it's for. If I'm a homeowner and I have a central air conditioning unit and we agree with OPC's recommendations such that we don't raise the incentive, is a heat pump an automatic option for me to consider? Or are there ductwork, piping, things that I'm going to have to do to my house? In other words, are we basically, I don't understand if we're limiting the flexibility for these homeowners to really, I mean, do they really have these choices?
I can't fully answer that. I do believe some type of preparation would be required depending on the home. Newer homes, most likely less preparation, right? But there may be some retrofits associated, but I'll leave that to someone else who might be able to answer that.
So, Commissioner, I am not an engineer, and I try not to play one on TV, but I do have some limited understanding from involvement in this program since its inception as to what some of this equipment is. And let's back up a step. So we're asking you to increase the incentives for all the equipment in this particular part of the program in an even-handed way. In order to be even-handed between gas and electric-powered equipment, because that's what the policy has been for this cycle, the cycle that's ending this year. We have both gas and electric facets of Empower, and we were told at the very outset of the cycle that we needed to be even-handed. And so while my client only sells electricity, and we would much rather have a customer buy a piece of equipment that uses electricity as opposed to one that uses gas, it's part of our duty, part of our charge from you to be even-handed in how we approach these programs, and that's the only reason why we're asking for the increase in the incentive with respect to this equipment. It is my understanding at a very high level, and that's all I got is a high-level understanding, that the infrastructure required for a heat pump is materially different. An electric heat pump is materially different from the interior home infrastructure needed for gas-powered central air. And and that's really basically more knowledge that I have from having in the past owned houses that have had both technologies in them at different houses, different technologies. So I cannot give you the specific details, but I knew that there is a difference. So our concern would be, and this is where the even-handedness comes in, while we want to make sure that there's every incentive for the customer to buy the electric-powered piece of equipment, if the customer nonetheless decides to buy, for a reason such as the one you've identified, a piece of gas-powered equipment, for this program cycle, we need to be even-handed, and that's why we're making this proposal.
Thank you. So maybe this is for Ms. Eichner. So if we don't accept your recommendation, that does not preclude a future decision as we address these things in the broader work group discussions.
No, Commissioner Bubar, no.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Eichner, just a quick question. Here we're talking about high-efficiency air conditioners. You've obviously heard a lot of debate over whether people should have natural gas stoves in their house. Have you heard that? What's OPC's position on gas appliances in the house?
Are you, Chairman Stanek, are you referring to our position in terms of Empower programming?
Generally.
If we're referring to, so our mandate is both to protect the interests, as you know, of residential ratepayers and have attention to the state's climate goals and the environment. So if we are looking at the interest of residential ratepayers and the environment, our position is that Empower should no longer be incentivizing gas appliances through Empower. We feel that it's inconsistent with state policy, it's inconsistent with recommendations from the Maryland Commission on Climate Change and the analysis conducted by E3. And that, I think we've published the material on that, and you're aware of our position, I'm sure.
You raise a good point, though. Do you see tension between your role as a ratepayer advocate and as a, I forgot the word you just used, climate advocate? Is that fair to say?
I think we are very careful in our role, and I think we're doing the best we can to balance the interests of both parts of our statute, both parts of our mandate.
How do you describe your climate mandate? Is it a climate advocate?
I don't know that I would want to characterize that for the office. I certainly don't want to speak for the entire office as to how different individuals in the office interpret our role. But what I can say is our position on gas appliances for Empower is consistent with also our role as a residential ratepayer advocate, because gas costs are going to go up, gas prices are going to go up, and we're very concerned about low-income ratepayers being stuck on the gas system and paying legacy costs when others have left in favor of heat pumps. So
My question was a little more detailed. So you did describe your office as a ratepayer advocate, is that correct?
That is correct. residential ratepayer advocate.
but not as a climate advocate.
I would refer to our statute, and I think that's the role that we take very seriously.
What does the statute say?
The statute allows us to, well, mandates that we are both a residential ratepayer advocate and that we pay attention to the environment and the state's climate goals, the state's environmental goals.
To my earlier question, and you framed it in terms of empower, but just generally, does the office have a position on gas appliances? Should there be a ban on natural gas stoves?
I do not know if our office has taken a position on that.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Eichner. I appreciate your filing today. I think it's great when Office People Council provides these inputs. Sometimes they may seem kind of like not timely, given we do have the power, but I think the point you make that we should try to as our state policies advance rapidly, we should try to maintain consistency with these types of programs. So I appreciate having this raise my conscience a little bit about some of these issues. When you develop these I guess proposal policies, and both for now and looking forward, you work with your expert advisor, right? The Vermont, I just forgot the name, Vermont group.
Yes,
Did,
VIC, yes.
Thank you. Yeah. Did they advise you on that? Work with you on that in this filing and then with this policy?
Yes, they did. And they worked with us on the SMECO filing a few months ago with the same 3 issues. Yes.
Okay. And so when they're in their capacity, they can provide, I guess, national input, perspectives on best practices and how other energy efficiency programs are being run. Is that case?
That's correct, Commissioner Richard. And we do discuss. I speak to our consultants from VEIC multiple times a week, and that's one of the main things we look at: what's happening, what's working, what's not working, trends, what's effective, what's not. Yes.
Okay. And so this is a direction that some of the leading programs around the country on energy efficiency, particularly those programs that those states may also have carbon decarbonization goals, electrification goals. Is that?
And yes, and I would say that for the midstream work group, the commission had ordered some benchmarking, and the benchmarking was performed with the Loper Energy LLC team. And it was filed in the last midstream work group report. And it did find, they surveyed programs in other states. They surveyed 10 different program administrators in other states. I don't recall off the top of my head the exact states, but it was included with the filing. And 60% were no longer including incentives for central air conditioners. Actually, 6 out of 10. 1 out of 10 planned to phase them out the following year. So it's safe to say that if that phase out occurred, 70% of those surveyed at this point no longer have incentives for central air conditioners.
Okay.
So that's part of the reason for our request. It is the trend that's occurring.
But this is the direction they're going. Okay, these programs are going. And you're not recommending today that we eliminate the incentive. That's correct, Greg. So that panhandle cabin still can get the incentive for an efficient central air conditioner.
Yes,
Okay.
we're not recommending that it be eliminated piecemeal with Potomac Edison's request right now. And also, what I should have said earlier, also, with regard to incentives, they're also supposed to incentivize things that would not have occurred but for the incentive. So that's another thing to think about. Is a person still going to buy an efficient air conditioner without that incentive? If we leave PE's program the way it is, right now there's still an incentive, but we certainly don't have to increase it, which may or may not make it consistent with the next cycle.
Okay, but you are recommending, rather than increase the central air conditioner, that perhaps those funds could be used for the higher efficiency, the product that's more in line with state policy, and that is the heat pump. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Electric heat pumps, those funds could be put to use there.
Okay. You're a statutory stakeholder along with Maryland Energy Administration. Sorry, Maryland Energy Administration. Have you consulted at all on this particular issue with MEA?
I would say only through the Future Programming Work Group. I have met with Dr. Idrisu, with other stakeholders. We've had multiple meetings. As to this particular issue for central air conditioners, I don't believe I've spoken to him about that or spoken directly with MEA about that.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. And I think this is very persuasive for me, but I would just suggest maybe sometimes when you have these recommendations that it would probably be even more powerful if both statutory, state statutory entities like yours, coming together with these types of recommendations. So anyway, thank you. Can I just ask the company? Just again, talking about the statutory responsibilities for MEA and People's Council, did the company reach out at all to those entities when developing this recommendation today or this request today?
It was discussed in the work groups that this was a desirable path to follow. SMECO led the way, and then we followed shortly thereafter. So there was discussion in the work group. It was, in fact, the work group discussions that prompted us to make this filing. That said, I did not, prior to or after making this filing, make a phone call to anyone at OPC or anyone at MEA to say, will you support us?
Okay. Given this filing, I mean, would the company at least consider the benefits to the program overall, the outcomes, if the company instead used those incentive funds and further increased the heat pump, just leaving in place, of course, the current air conditioner, central air conditioner. But I mean, this recommendation comes from a nationally recognized expert. I mean, would the company entertain that?
I have to be very careful how I answer your question, Commissioner, because my understanding of the utilities charge for the current program cycle, the charge that was made to both the gas and the electric companies, was that both the gas and the electric companies need to play nice with each other. They need to treat each other in a fair and even-handed manner. So my company sells electricity. As I said earlier, we have every desire to have customers buy products, buy equipment, and install that in their homes that uses electricity. But when we are being even-handed, we believe, and I personally believe, that if we're going to increase the incentives for one set of equipment that's electricity powered, we're going to increase the incentives, which is what this request asks for. To be fair, we have to ask for an increase in the corresponding incentives for the gas-powered equipment. That's what would be fair and even-handed and consistent with how the Commission at the outset of this 3-year cycle said that the utilities needed to interact with each other. So I would not endorse, for that reason, and perhaps that reason alone, I would not endorse holding back on this incentive increase so as to favor the electric-powered equipment.
Well, okay, I hear what you're saying.
And it sounds like I'm arguing against my
no, that's fine.
interest, but I think I explained why I'm doing that.
Okay, no, I hear your explanation. Again, I guess it would just be my desire and hope for the world, I guess, if the statutory entities like Office of People Counsel and the Maryland Energy Administration were consulted by the companies when they're making these types of requests. So we're not just hearing them argue for the first time here. I guess I'm not really sure. I've heard of this fairness doctrine issue. It just seems like there's a good argument that's been made to make this program more consistent with where the trends of the rest of the country are going, and particularly in a state like Maryland that has decarbonization and climate change goals. This seems to be more in line with. But in any case, I'll end there, Mr. Chairman, and I am in support of the Office of People's Counsel proposal today. But nonetheless, whatever your motion is, I do want to see these incentives increase, and I'll just make that known for the record. That's all.
Thank you. You want to see the incentives increase, so is it a sort of a, well, let's see what my
I already
motion
have a
is.
feeling I know where the motion is going
Okay.
since it's on the buck sheet.
But you do agree with the utilities?
Where the vote, yeah, and so I'm gonna
So it's a half and half.
the motion. I mean, if there are other commissioners that would like to change the motion to support Office of People Counsel, that's where I would prefer to go.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Linton, anything to wrap us up?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I just had a couple of hopefully very quick questions. One for Mr. Trout. Good morning. You've referenced a couple of times the importance of, and the Commission's directive to it that you treat both fuel types the same. For your central air conditioners, Tier 3 and 4, are you referencing gas-powered air conditioners here, or are you just talking about electric?
No, I believe that except for the equipment where OPC is opposing the increase, that is all electric. Everything except where OPC is opposing, that's all electric powered equipment. And with respect to the technologies where OPC is opposing the increase, some or all of it is gas powered.
Okay.
And this is where I go off the cliff of my lack of engineering knowledge, and I don't know if there's a subset within that's within that category that would be still electric powered. I doubt it, but it's possible. But certainly the bulk of it is gas powered. It's the kind of equipment that I have, for example, at my house, that is sadly gas powered, and for which I've been paying through the nose for the last few months. So yeah.
The gas-powered central air conditioners.
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you. So, question for Ms. Zeiker. And good morning.
Good morning.
The proposal here, then, I'm assuming the improved, efficient central air conditioners that would replace the more inefficient ones. I'm assuming most likely they will be electric as opposed to gas. So would the Office of People's Counsel still be opposed to having that incentive made available for a customer if they're switching from what would effectively be a natural gas air conditioner to an electric one?
And Commissioner Linton, are you referring to the increase in incentives or just in general with central air conditioning?
Just the central air conditioner. I believe that was the only one you had a concern with. The other ones you're okay with.
So we would oppose increased incentives for central air conditioners, but we would still oppose for the next cycle any incentives for central air conditioners just because they almost block heat pumps. They really make it difficult. Once someone has gone in and spent the money on a brand new central air conditioner, and then they start hearing, they start receiving marketing, they hear that to meet the state's climate goals, they need to put in a heat pump. It's basically a wasted piece of equipment if they then put in a heat pump. So we want to avoid that. We don't want customers to waste their money, and we don't want to make it more expensive for customers to buy a heat pump later. So we would still oppose that for the 2024 cycle.
Okay. So given if a customer has, if the customer's in the market, so to speak, for replacing a central air conditioner, certainly the price for replacing a central air conditioner versus a heat pump is significantly different. I mean, it's probably double, one versus the other one. So in light of the fact that we have, as we discussed in one of our more recent Empower Maryland hearings, so many customers in the state that are not participating in the program at all, even though they're still contributing towards it. Is it really a concern that we could have one customer needing to choose between the two? I mean, why wouldn't it be better to give that customer who's in front of us whatever incentive to remove the inefficient central air conditioner, but then we still have a large body of other customers that we could pursue with replacing a heat pump or something else because we need as many people involved as possible?
And Commissioner Linton, I see your point, and I guess what it comes down to, a customer is going to, because we know that heat pumps are the direction that the state has to go to, it just seems inefficient to incentivize. And customers can still replace their central air conditioners, of course. They're still on the market and they can certainly do that. But when we send a message that we're incentivizing them, I worry, are we telling them, okay, how many years do you have left on your furnace? Are you going to replace this central air conditioner now and then replace your furnace in 2 years, and you could have just bought a heat pump and it would have been less? Those are the types of issues that we run into because it is cheaper to replace it is cheaper to install a heat pump, electric heat pump, instead of replacing both a central air conditioner and a gas furnace. That we generally know to be true. So those are the types of issues that we have with this, and that's why we feel that the incentives just send the wrong message and point people in the wrong direction.
Okay, thanks. One other question for Mr. Trout. You mentioned earlier that part of the reason for proposing these changes was to help you achieve your goals for this current cycle. How far away are you in this area? Or if this is something that you don't get, are you now going to miss your goals, or is this something that if you get it, you just barely get there? How does this impact your approach?
So I know we just filed our report several weeks ago, and I ought to have those numbers memorized, and I apologize. I don't have it broken down program by program. I believe this program is underperforming, and the reason I have that belief is that we have enough money to increase these incentives without changing the budget, and that's because we're underperforming, and we've got extra money in this program's budget as approved by the commission. So we do need to improve, we do need to reach more customers in the time we have left for all of these pieces of equipment, including the ones that we've spent some time discussing this morning. And we believe, based on the work group discussions, that increasing the incentives in the way that we have asked for now and that you have previously approved for SMECO is an effective way of accomplishing that goal.
All right.
We're gonna do whatever we need to do to meet our goal for this cycle across the board, our overall goal. We're going to do whatever we need to do in order to do that. But our request, my standing in front of you today, is part of that effort.
Okay, thank you. That's all that I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Based on the arguments, I would move that we approve the incentive change request. The vote begins with Commissioner Bubar.
Aye.
Commissioner Linton.
Mr. Chairman, I would also vote aye. I do support the idea that People's Council is talking about, since it won't be here the next time to vote on it anyway, but I think it's the appropriate way to go long-term, but I am concerned about some confusion issues, and quite frankly, if the company's able to move these, reach these goals that we have currently, that's only going to help us long-term reach the overall goals the state has set. So it's pretty much in all, whatever we have to do on the table to get to the goals, and that's kind of the reason why I'm supporting it this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Richard.
And I vote aye also, stating, that I do support what the People's Council is arguing today, and hopefully we can get there maybe as we develop the next program cycle. So thank you.
Thank you. I vote aye. The motion is approved. Have a nice day.